The Magick Kitchen Podcast is funded and supported by the witchwoodteahouse.com, offering a variety of hand-blended loose leaf teas as well as loose herbs for all of your ritual, spell work, wellness, and everyday enjoyment needs. If you would like to support this podcast while sipping a great cup of tea, head over to the witchwoodteahouse.com and find the magic that's in store for you.
This time in the Magick Kitchen, we are joined by Deborah Blake discussing best practices for respectful, responsible deity work for witches and pagans.
I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Wells.
And welcome to the Magick Kitchen Podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between.
The Magick Kitchen Podcast is funded and supported by the witchwoodteahouse.com, offering a variety of hand-blended loose leaf teas as well as loose herbs for all of your ritual, spell work, wellness, and everyday enjoyment needs. If you would like to support this podcast while sipping a great cup of tea, head over to the witchwoodteahouse.com and find the magic that's in store for you.
Deborah Blake is a best-selling author, beloved witchcraft teacher, and longtime practicing eclectic witch known for her warm, practical approach to modern magic. She has written 19 books, 18 with Llewellyn, including Everyday Witchcraft, The Eclectic Witch's Book of Shadows, and the very popular Everyday Witch Tarot. A gifted storyteller and community leader, Deborah's work helps witches of all levels deepen their practice with clarity, humor, and grounded wisdom. You can learn more at deborahblakeauthor.com. And we're very excited to have you here. Deborah is a fan of the show and a friend of the show, so it is always a pleasure to have you.
It's great to have you again.
Yeah, thank you. I always love being on this show. I do a certain amount of podcasts, and yours is one of my favorites. I mean, you guys are just so grounded and fun and not full of yourselves. I'm not saying that. Yeah. Which you should be full of yourselves. You're fabulous, but nonetheless,
we do what we can. We just like a good conversation, and
Exactly.
so your latest book, it's coming out in April, so it is up for pre-order. People, is a fantastic resource. The Everyday Witch's Book of Deities. Is that that's the correct title, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I think so. I had to stop and think about it. Yes, Everyday Witch's Book of Deities. Yep.
It's funny because that's definitely something the public probably doesn't think about. But naming our books actually is probably one of the last stages of the process. We have a working title, but the real thing will probably be different.
Well, and it isn't always up to us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that people don't understand is we don't necessarily get the final word on it. They'll say, well, we like in this case, I wanted to call it The Everyday Witch's Book of Deities. And Llewellyn was like, we think it'd be better without the "the" because some of the other Everyday Witch books don't have the "the." And I'm like, all right, whatever. I don't care. I was like, call it anything you want as long as you sell it. Really.
Yeah.
That is my extremely pragmatic and shallow approach to authoring. Yeah.
Well, and it's a good title because it describes what this book does. And I think it's a unique book because there's lots of books on working with deity. But I'm blessed to have contributed a little piece about working with the Greek gods. And
fabulous piece, by the way. Fabulous piece.
Thank you. Thank you. And I was really touched that you approached the book that way. You approached the book with the idea that where there are living cultures still existing in the places that our deity pantheons come from, places like Greece and Italy and even the UK and Norse countries. And these places still exist that had a connection to these ancient ways and these deities that have existed for thousands of years. And a lot of modern books sort of present that. Maybe they'll mention these are the Greek deities, but they don't really go into depth of recognizing this continued lineage of living culture and how that may or may not fit in with the ancient one.
You are actually one of my inspirations for deciding to include some of the people that I knew who practiced these, ancient cultures in a modern way. And they weren't necessarily, not everybody was from that culture. I mean, you have a Greek background, and we had you talk about, the Greek deities, and how, things are approached these days, because I obviously follow you both online. I had been really fascinated reading some of your posts about how witchcraft is illegal in Greece right now. I would never have guessed that, that the worship of these deities who, all of us, who are modern witches and work with deities, tend to work with the more well-known, the Greek, the Roman, the Egyptian, the Celtic, and without giving a lot of thought to the cultures that they came from. And so I wanted to do two different things with this book that I didn't see done in previous books. One of which was I wanted to actually address how the cultures worked with deity, how deity affected the day-to-day life of cultures that, like the Greeks, like the Egyptians, because unlike most of us who, as modern witches, we may connect with deity, at the holidays or at the full moons, or we may even have a specific deity that, we have an altar for or something. But for most of these cultures, there was no separation between deity worship and everyday life. It was an integral part of who you were, why you did what you did, where you fit in the society, what the rules were. So I wanted to give people some background glimpses into where these deities came from so that maybe their practice would be a little more enlightened. I mean, it doesn't mean they had to change what they were doing, but knowing how these individual cultures, and I only picked the very core main cultures that most witches work with for a couple of reasons, which we can talk about later. But the other thing was, because I was lucky enough to know, I have a friend who's a practicing druid, and, so he was able to give me some insight on what that looks like in the modern world. And you were able to give me the insight into what the Greek gods look like in the modern world. So neither of those things were things I had seen I would see, there were a couple of books where the authors talked about their particular connection with the deities, but it was just whichever one culture they happened to be associated with. So I hope that it gave a more well-rounded view of deity practice than otherwise.
Close your eyes for a moment and imagine arriving somewhere built to hold you. Stone paths leading to hidden caves of the goddess. Salt water clearing away old patterns. Long tables of food and friendship shared beside a sunset. Temples of the old gods. Alive in and around you. You are invited to join me in Greece on an in-person pilgrimage through ancient temples and landscapes where women once gathered to grieve, rest, and remember themselves. We travel to the Temple of Artemis, Hecate's cave at Elyse. We swim inside a temple of Hera and enter a hidden goddess cave and sacred sites to Aphrodite and Medusa. Our days are shaped by land, water, and ritual. Our nights are spent at a private villa with expansive views, a private pool, deep rest, and exceptional food prepared with care. This retreat is for women and non-binary seekers carrying exhaustion, grief, or a long history of holding it together. Join us at ElyseWells.com/feminine wound, where spots still remain. The land can hold it. Come to Greece and answer that call to heal. Yeah, let's talk about culture and deity work, because so many witches feel like their witchcraft practice has to be relegated to essentially a box. Maybe it's something they do solo only. Maybe they don't even have anyone in their house who knows they do the witchcraft that they do, or that they sit at their altar, or that they work with any of these deities. And even if somebody is out of the broom closet, as we say, and they're more open about their practice, it's unlikely in the modern world that our outer culture, that the overculture we're a part of, will support this. What do you think we've lost with that? Like, how does modern deity connection suffer, or does it? Maybe it doesn't, in your view.
Well, I think that there is a certain comfort to be had from connection to deity. I mean, deity isn't always comfortable. That's like a whole different thing. Sometimes deity kicks your ass and says, hey, I have been sending you these little mild messages and suggestions saying you should do this, and you haven't done it. So here, have a thunderbolt. But, I grew up Jewish, and as a Jew, that religion was sort of a part of your day-to-day life. Now, in my family, we weren't very Jewish, but certainly, like, my father had been raised kosher. It affected their lives, and they went to, we went to temple, pretty much every Friday until I was probably 13. So there's what's the word? Some author I am. I can't think of the word. It sets boundaries. It gives you a framework for your life that I think many of us feel the lack of, but don't know what to put instead. I think many people are searching for something. I certainly was searching for something until I found witchcraft and went, aha. Because before that, I was pretty much agnostic. I mean, I had an open mind about the possibility of deity, but I'd looked for it in a lot of places and hadn't found it until I went to my first pagan circle and, reached out like I had so many times before, and somebody reached back. And it was God and Goddess, and they sort of went, well, where the heck have you been? It took you long enough. And it was like, okay, thanks. Thank you very much. But, I do think that framework, that having regular deity connection gives, it can be very, very comforting, and also a good guide to how you live your life. I mean, I live my life with a certain set of moral boundaries, some of which I got from my parents, some of which, in theory, I get from my culture, although if you looked around these days, you'd think that they didn't exist. And some of them I get now from the rules that I have taken on from my beliefs of what my deities find appropriate or not appropriate in how I behave.
That's actually an interesting point, because I work mostly with who I've come to understand is the goddesses of the red thread. So I worked with Inanna. She's my primary patron goddess, but she's shown me her aspects as Aphrodite. And so as that relationship began to wind and weave, Inanna has showed me over the years all these other goddesses that she's associated with, and how throughout history these quote unquote dark goddesses are very connected in their purpose and why they're here for humans. And so I kind of work with that lineage of goddesses. So Hecate is part of that, Persephone, Athena.
Hecate is one of my primaries. And she's a dark goddess, and people think of her, as this sort of creepy, scary, which she is, but she's also extremely protective. And again, this rule of law. She protects the people who follow the rules that she considers, hard and fast, and she's not real flexible. But that's okay. I think there are certain things you don't want to be flexible on.
Exactly. And I think that's what as you were speaking, I was realizing is my moral code, yeah, it comes from overculture a little bit of what I was raised with and all those things, but the deepest held principles I have like activism, like standing up for what's right and pointing out what's wrong when it's wrong and finding ways to elevate the voices of the marginalized, the people who do suffer and are victimized, those sorts of things. Those are my values. Mostly, I can't point to that as something from my parents or my overculture. That is from my deity practice.
Absolutely. And, I think I've always had some of that. I mean, partially it comes from I came from a culture where we got the shit beat out of us a lot in a lot of places. So, for me, trying to help the people who were picked on, or were targeted in some way might have been a reaction to that. But absolutely, I believe very strongly that my deities want me to stand up for the weak, to be the voice of the voiceless, to acknowledge what people are maybe feeling that they don't feel free to acknowledge. And I don't care anymore. I am the cranky crone. I have, what little boundaries I had before are pretty much gone now. And if people don't like me, they can go read somebody else's book or watch somebody else on Instagram or whatever. But yeah, I absolutely agree that I feel like I have to live up to a certain standard. And some of that came to me when I did my dedication as a high priestess, which I did after leaving my first group, which was very Wiccan. My original teachings, my original high priestess was Wiccan. But I didn't do sort of a traditional high priestess path. I mean, I did the year and a day of extra study. And then I left that group and spent 9 months on my own, and then did a self-dedication with a couple of friends, one of whom had been a practicing witch for longer than I had, and another one was just a really cool person who felt like the right way to do it. But when I did my dedication as a high priestess, one of the things I said is, I am here to do your work. By taking on this title, this role, I am committing myself the same way a priest or a rabbi or a minister or anybody else who is a spiritual leader takes on this, to me, responsibility to others. And it isn't something that you necessarily get to go, oh, this isn't convenient for me right now. I don't want to do it. It's just there.
Yeah.
I find a lot of people struggle with that too. They struggle with deciding, do I dedicate myself to this deity? How do I even know this deity is actually what I'm encountering? I think you and I have similar backgrounds. Like, I came from the Wiccan background. That's where my first training was. That's where my intense training was. And then I stepped out on my own and started forging my own path, my own way of doing things. And for me, that changed the way deity shows up for me. Where in my Wiccan path, it was very god, goddess, male, female. There was a little more rigidity there. Where now it's almost like anything goes. Like, whoever wants to contact me, whoever wants to work with me, there they are. And I can choose.
And I would
or not.
agree with that completely. I now call myself an eclectic witch,
Yes.
as opposed to a Wiccan. And don't get me wrong, I am extremely grateful for the training and the background that I got. And I have friends who call themselves Wiccan, and they are not that different from I am. Where I think it has a little bit to do with, stepping outside the slightly rigid, organized, although calling Wicca organized is
You're not wrong.
yeah, but I mean, that's one of the things that appealed to me about witchcraft. It was people are like, I don't believe in organized religion. I went, well, then be a witch, because you will be all set. There's no
Anything
organization
goes.
here. Yeah, we got nothing. I mean, there are bits and pieces that are organized. They're just not organized with each other in any way. But yeah, I often just use sort of God and goddess. And when I dedicated myself, I didn't dedicate myself to a specific deity, because I think even then I was aware that they come and go depending on where you are in your life and what it is you need and what it is maybe somebody wants from you. And you don't get to go, oh no, I'm working with Hecate now, I'm a little busy, could you come back later?
Yeah.
Good luck with that. No, I
Take
don't
a number.
think so. Yeah, exactly. Can you give me 2 weeks to get comfortable with this idea? No? Okay. But yeah, I do think that the idea of being flexible with deity is important, because we aren't necessarily in charge.
Right. Well, and I also think of working with deity in a much broader sense, where it's not this, you only get one, you only get one shot, or you only get one option as a broad
Right.
spectrum. I really think, in my experience anyway, deity is much bigger than that. They're much bigger than our human perspectives. So when they come to us, they're not looking to be the be all end all, like we're taught in the Abrahamic
Right.
religions, that there is only one, you could only follow the one, anything else is blasphemy, right?
And you can
And
only do it in certain ways or else.
exactly. And I really have found that since I've loosened my perception, that has allowed me to expand tremendously in how I associate and show up and how deity approaches me.
Well, and I also think it's important to be open and paying attention and listening, because sometimes they come to you, and if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. Now,
Right.
sometimes, like I said, they're not subtle. I actually think it was last year, I was doing a hypnotherapy session, and my hypnotherapist happens to also be a shaman. So sometimes things show up that you don't
Nice.
expect. And she's a witch. She was one of them. She was, at my dedication. We've known each other many, many years. And Hearn came through and basically bitched me out for focusing so much on goddess for all these years and not enough on God. And
Wow.
it makes sense, because, of course, as somebody who came from a very male or, deity oriented background, I was so happy to have goddess. And it was
Right.
it felt so comfortable for me to be able to connect with this female energy deity. And apparently, I got a certain amount of time to be comfortable, and then was reminded that, when I call on God and goddess, it's not like God and goddess. That so I have been focusing more. I now have a part of my altar is dedicated to Hearn. I went out and picked up some feathers and acorns, and yeah, I make sure to be more mindful of that. And it was interesting when I was looking at books on deities, there are a ton of goddess books.
Yes.
And there are fewer books that are both. So I tried to make sure that I was being fair. And Hearn's an interesting sort of god, because when I was doing my research, he's the only god that apparently came from a folk tale in England. He was not a he was a local legend, but not something that was known all over the UK or in Britain or wherever. And yet he is still a very substantial presence. And I will tell you, when he was talking to me, there was no question in my mind that he was a god. And there is some thought that he actually is connected to Odin, because he is associated with hanging from trees, which Odin hung upside down from the world tree. And you were talking about how a god in one culture often morphs into gods in other cultures. Some of the connections are really fascinating. I mean, the obvious ones obviously are the Roman and the Greek, because the Romans basically just went, we're going to rename that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Inanna was the base of many goddesses who followed after her, as far as I can tell.
Quick pause, because if any of this is resonating with you, but you still feel like you're missing something, you're not alone. Most witches aren't confused because they're doing it wrong. They're confused because no one ever taught them the skills or the context beneath the surface. That's why I created the Rebel Mystic Witchcraft skill trees. Each tree is a structured, grounded path that teaches you how different elements of witchcraft actually work. So you can build real confidence instead of second-guessing yourself. If you're ready for clarity, you can explore all the skill trees I have available, plus the growing library at leandrawitchwood.com, or feel free to join my free community, the Rebel Mystic Coven, to learn more. All right, back to the conversation.
I have a question for both of you on this, because I can share my opinion too, but do you think syncretism, the idea that some gods and goddesses are connected, like Inanna and Aphrodite, or Pan and Dionysius, or does the syncretism of gods or goddesses across culture, in your opinion, does it make believing that their connection to a god or goddess is real harder or easier? Like, is it harder to trust your instincts because of all the syncretism, or is it actually a comfort?
That's a good...
I go back and forth in this in my own head all the time. I have an answer today, but
I think it depends on who you are and what your approach to things is. For me, it actually makes it easier, because I tried to explain this in the book, and hopefully it won't confuse people when the book comes out, that there are more than one ways of looking at deity. And one is that it is this sort of humongous, much greater than we can comprehend energy or wisdom or whatever. And then when you get below that, and there's a technical name for it now, I don't remember it, don't ask me. And then when you get below that, you get the individual deities, you get, goddess or god. And then below that, you get, deities that show up wearing a certain face. A friend of mine, who is not a witch, said to me years ago something that I thought was extremely wise. And she said that she believed that deity came to each of us in the form that we could best connect with and understand. And so if you're connecting with Aphrodite, that is because that is the form that deity has manifested in, because it is easiest for you, not them. It's all easy for them, and maybe sometimes that will shift and change to another form, another name. Is it all part of the greater whole? I think so. Do you still make this individual connection to a being that manifests in a way that is comfortable for them, comfortable for you? Also, yes, because it's a deity. You can't put it in a box.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that, because like I was saying before, being able to kind of let go of some of those human constructs related to deity has helped me open up my perception of deity. Elyse and I have had this conversation before, because I have a strange form of Apollo that comes to me that is a black Apollo. And he wears a black mask with gold etching. And that's the version of him that comes. And so in my research, he's associated with Belenus, the Celtic sun god.
Right.
And they
Yeah, there
both have
is
very
definitely an
similar,
association. Yeah.
yeah, and they both have similar aspects. You know, the Dark Apollo, and Belenos, he's healing and light, but he's also can be that dark side. And so it's like the shadow side of it, the shadow aspect. So when I'm working in the shadow, that's who shows up, is this dark version of a sun god, the eclipse version.
That's very
And
cool.
yeah, it's so interesting because it baffled me for many years. I'm like, no, it's not supposed to be like that. And I was stuck in my head. I was stuck with this. That's not what he looks like. That's not who he is. For my path, yes, that's who he is.
And
That's how he shows up.
I think at a certain point along your journey, especially as you amass a certain amount of experience and get old, that, you learn to be more flexible about this and less rigid in your assumptions of how this connection works, and sort of go with the flow.
Yeah.
And yes, if you can find explanations, that's helpful, because we all sort of like to have explanations. Deity doesn't need to give you explanations. They don't necessarily feel any obligation to do so. They don't have to explain themselves. They just show up and go, okay, here I am. I have things that I would like you to do for me, or I think that you need my help and I am offering it. I mean, one of the things about Apollo that sort of fascinated me, I did a lot of research for this book, so much freaking research. Have I mentioned I don't like research? But I wanted to get it right.
Well,
I really, and
yes.
there's so much misinformation out there that I had to keep weeding through things. I mean, there were a lot of books that came out in, the early years of Wicca, 50s, 60s, 70s, that people were putting out this information that the rest of us who came along afterwards went, oh, look, here's this expert, and they said such and such about this deity. And we just kept disseminating this misinformation. I have done that myself, and you don't realize it's not the right information, or that it's not well-rounded information, until you do the deep dive. And most of us sort of take it on the surface. And so I think one of the benefits of opening your mind and heart to deity, however it comes to you, is it doesn't matter what anybody wrote. That includes me. What matters is what deity is telling you.
Yeah.
And if deity is telling you to get off your ass and do something different, probably you should do that. If deity is saying, take a nap, this is ridiculous, then you should probably do that. Light a candle, stand under the moon, whatever they're telling you. Don't worry about whether the book is right or not. Worry about, the voice in your head.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of practitioners get stuck, is they're like, well, they told me to do it this way, or the book said to do it this way, or the influencer told me I had to do it this way. And maybe if you're following a specific lineage, a specific type of tradition from a very specific lineage, you want to show respect to that. You do. But I found that most things in the craft are very off the cuff,
and personal.
Oh, and how many times have we gone into ritual? Any of us have gone into ritual with an outline. We got all the incantations written down. We have all the stuff. It's all written down. You get in there and deity spirit's like, nah, we're going to do it this way instead. I've done that almost every single time.
I know.
That is pretty common. And also, you do a spell and you think the results are going to be one thing, and they turn out to be another thing. And the other thing isn't bad. It's just not what you thought you were looking for. Somebody higher up on the food chain went, that's not really what you need. I see what you're asking for, but I'm not going to send it to you the way you're asking for it, because that would not be the most helpful way. Surprise! You get to lose your job, get a different job, move towns, get a new boyfriend, and this path that you're taking is now taking you to the place you said you wanted to be when you started out. Just not the whole big lottery check you were asking for.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't neatly laid out the way you thought it should
Hardly
be.
ever. And, one of the things that if you've ever read any of my books, I say over and over and over again, it's probably to the point where people want to throw the books across the room. There is no one right way. There is no one right path. There is the path that is right for you. And if it feels right in your gut, in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit, don't worry about what somebody else told you was the correct way to do things. Don't worry about whether or not it falls into your particular the path you say you've chosen. If this is the path, our paths change over time. My practice, I've been practicing, I don't know, 30 something years now. And at that, I was sort of a late bloomer. I didn't come to it until my 30s. But my practice of witchcraft now does not bear a big resemblance to my practice of witchcraft then.
Oh,
my coven's been together since 2004, and our practice as a coven has mutated and changed and been affected by the world around us and by the realities of our lives. We used to get together for full moons, and half of us can't drive after dark anymore. So, like the practicalities.
Yeah. I think that's, practicality is, I think, where a lot of witches that have been practicing for a few decades, where we really start to lean. How can I make this effortless? How can I make this a little less pageantry and more substance?
I only have 20 minutes of time and energy to do this. How can I do the things I need to do in that 20 minutes instead of the hour-long ritual that I would have done, a few years ago? I mean, you should have seen us trying to practice during COVID.
Oh, man.
We were outside, far apart from each other, wearing masks, even outside, because nobody really knew in the beginning. Even since then, we have a beautiful goblet that was handcrafted by one of our folks. We do not pass that goblet around the circle for people to take sips out of anymore. We use Dixie cups.
Right.
Everybody gets their own Dixie cup. Is it fancy? No, it is not.
No.
Is it practical? Yes, we can still do cakes and ale without, I don't know, passing the germs around. So, I am an extremely pragmatic, practical witch. And I think that rather than not doing your practice because you don't have the time or you don't have the energy or you don't have the tools, or you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing to deity or worship them in the wrong way, do what you can do. If you have 5 minutes, do a 5-minute thing. Light a candle, talk to deity in whatever form it comes to you. And one of the other things I addressed in the book, it does not necessarily have to be strictly male or female. There are some deities who used both forms, multiple forms. And certainly if you are a person who does not identify in the strict parameter of male or female, or if you identify as both or neither, there are deities who you can work with very comfortably. There are really only a few that are extremely specific about who they will work with. So, I think that was another thing that I tried to address in this book. Don't feel like, if you were born in a male body and now feel like you are a female, that you can't worship and connect to Goddess. Goddess doesn't care. I assure you. I assure you, deities are much more accepting of those things, that changes and the broad picture things, than human beings are. Human beings may care. Most deities.
One of the classes I teach and the containers that I hold for my students is I've come up with 9 archetypes of the divine feminine. And the first thing that I address in this whole course is, don't think of feminine as male, female, man, woman. Think of feminine as aspects of self, aspects of who we are, not just oh, I'm a woman, so I'm going to be naturally nurturing.
Right.
That's the one of the mindsets I try to not break, but try to realign when I go into this container with my students. And most of them, once they hit that point, they're like, "Oh my God, my mind is blown right now. I don't know. Yeah, like I've seen it and I can't go back."
Well, and one of the things that I always say is all of us have some masculine and some
Yes.
feminine in us. We are a combination. We're, one chromosome away from being the other, and in some cases, no chromosomes away from being the other or both or whatever. And this is why women can connect with male gods and men can connect with female gods, because we all contain those things within us in one aspect of, there are women who are very much warrior. There are men who are very much nurturing. And you can be both. You can kick ass and then put a band-aid on it. There there are certainly parts of myself that I feel are more of a, at least in our society, a masculine trait. And remember, societies viewed these things differently throughout the years too. So, the Greeks may have had a very different way of looking at certain societal norms for gender, than we do.
Yeah.
We currently have some pretty small boxes where people are trying to expand them. But yeah, if you don't feel like you fit in those small boxes, find a big bag.
Make the box bigger.
Right. Or throw away the box and just walk through the world however you want to walk through the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to talk about perfect trust. We might have some listeners rolling their eyes here because I talk about it a lot, but perfect love and perfect trust is truly the foundation of modern witchcraft. And it has been lost in the greater conversation. I'd never, ever, ever see an online influencer, somebody who's outside of, maybe they've never trained with another person. They totally just started practicing on their own from books. I never seem to see perfect trust or perfect love introduced online. And it's so important. And I think the answer to the question of how can I trust these gods? How can I know that this is real? How do I know that leaving that offering is going to do anything? How do I know this spell jar is going to, all of that, how, it's answered by perfect trust.
Faith. What you're talking about is faith. Perfect trust is faith. And, maybe if you use that term instead of perfect trust, because I think most of us feel like complete and total trust is nearly impossible. But faith is a little more wibbly wobbly. That's
a technical term, right?
That is right. Yeah. Timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly.
Love it.
There's your sci-fi geek reference, people. But, I think the idea of having faith in deity, faith that they are listening, faith that they are watching out for you and protecting you, and, that is not a guarantee that they're going to protect you from everything. Life is still life. If we all walked around in a perfect world, things would be very different, but we wouldn't be the same kind of human beings.
Yeah, I was gonna say we wouldn't because we wouldn't have to reincarnate anymore if we figured it all out.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, and we wouldn't learn. I mean, the thing is, we are often sent difficult lessons that we feel like are punishments, and they're not necessarily punishments. They're opportunities to grow and change. And that doesn't mean they don't hurt. And that doesn't mean they don't leave scars. But when people say, well, why does God allow this? Or why do deities allow this? First of all, I believe in free will, which means that we are not puppets. They are not pulling our strings. They cannot and or will not affect every aspect of our lives. And we wouldn't want them to. I like having free will, even if it means I get to screw up a lot. Yeah. That's, and have, issues that would, it would be nice if some deity would go, oh, about that anxiety, let me just take that away for you. But that's not how it works. You need the opportunities to work on your stuff. But sometimes, you can ask for help and you get it. And that's my faith, my perfect trust is less in what they are going to do for me and more in their existence in general.
Yes,
I
yes.
absolutely believe in God and Goddess, whatever names you want to give them. I have zero doubt that they are out there. I have zero doubt that there have been times when they have really affected my life, when they have protected me, when they have guided me, when they have steered me in a good direction, when they have watched over those that I loved or, helped those that I have loved leave this plane and go to another one. I also have faith in my own ability to get through life without having my hand held all the time.
Yeah, so it's interesting too. I have 2 points on this. One is that deity work is shadow work. We really aren't going to be able to have meaningful deity relationships if we're not working on, that's why they're there, is to help us on this life journey, which is to overcome challenges, which means there has to be challenges. So yes, I love that awareness that, it really is shadow work to have to work with deity. The other thing I was thinking of is that for some people, like I run into this with students a lot, especially in witch codes, people really hate Christianized language. So faith scares them. They don't want to talk about faith. And I kind of get that, because faith as a word, it sort of externalizes the power. It says, you know what? I trust that the guy who's repairing my car knows what he's doing. I have to have faith in that guy because I can't repair the car. I can't help. There's nothing I can do here. I have to have full faith in that guy. It's external. But trust implies, eye contact in a way. It's like, you see me, I see you. It's a reciprocity of, yes, Inanna doesn't need as much from me as I do from her most of the time. She's a goddess. I'm one person who works with her. But I do think that we have trust with each other. Like, she trusts that I'm going to uphold the morals she's instilled in me, and I'm going to, and also the acts of service, being a high priestess, being a teacher, like running pilgrimages, all those things are acts of dedication to her in my mind. And so she trusts that that's going to keep happening on my end. And I can trust that on her end, she's going to, my husband is an atheist animist is the best way to describe him, which is very paradoxical. So he loves nature, he loves animals, he's very connected to the earth, but he doesn't work with deity. And he works with me full time in my business, and he'll have questions sometimes about what I teach. And he edits the podcast for years now, so he knows a lot about what I do. He helps us set up for coven meetings. Like he's in it, but he's not a believer in the same way. And it's interesting when my perfect trust is tested by that, because he'll be like, well, how do you know you're not going to have someone sign up for a pilgrimage who is just, really dangerous or crazy or brings drugs, or how do you know, blah, blah. And I'm like, I have perfect trust that Inanna is not going to send that, or if the retreat's being put together at Delphi, Apollo is not going to call in for this experience somebody like that. I just have perfect trust in that. I know that that's how it's going to go. Do I do other things? Yeah, I make sure I meet the people before they come. We do a call. Like I cover the mundane world bases too. But all those things, I don't have to have anxiety at the back end afterwards, because I really do have that perfect trust in the contract, if you will, between me and the gods of Greece in the case of retreats, or, the goddesses of the red thread in the case of that course. Like, I know the people I'll call in are going to join that reciprocity. So if anyone out there is listening and faith is not the word they like, maybe that will help you feel the two sides of faith.
My 2 hot takes on that is going back to the hand holding, the idea that, we're following a deity and they're just going to do everything for us. That takes away from our experience, and experience helps us develop that understanding. And that's the real, that's the good stuff in our practices, where we have not just knowing, not just intellectual knowledge, but we understand what we're doing. We understand why we're doing it. We understand where it came from. We understand the principles around it, which, and when I look at perfect love and perfect trust, and I will be honest with you, from my Wiccan days till now, I always have an issue with that statement. I've always had an issue with it. And I didn't understand. I didn't understand why. I knew I had an issue. I knew kind of why I had an issue, but I didn't understand why I had the issue with it until I did my own shadow work, until I worked with my own deities and started really digging into that. And the reason I always had an issue with it is because it wasn't trauma informed. Someone who's trying to reach out and trust deity or have faith or have perfect love and perfect trust for a deity who has never experienced someone in their life that they can trust can't grasp that. Will have a real hard time with that. So if you've been betrayed by people in your life who you're supposed to trust and have faith in, it's a leap for them to be able to have perfect love and perfect trust for a coven or for a deity and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of work there. And I think that's why the idea of faith, having faith, has made people so prickly around that idea, because we've seen so much betrayal in the institutions that are supposed to support faith. I know we just went heavy and deep there, but
no, I love it.
Welcome to my podcast, everybody.
Yeah.
Have some ice cream. You'll feel better.
Yeah.
And those are humans that cause that pain and suffering. So I think if anything, that gives us more opening for healing to be like, well, this is deity. It's like why people don't want to work with the God. They're like, I've been betrayed AF by that Christian God or, that Muslim God, or like, I'm not going to go near male deity. I finally got free of that. But male divinity, like divine masculinity, that's a better way to say that. Divine masculinity is so different than human dudes. I've never really met the divine masculine in whole.
But if someone has not had that experience with a divine masculine individual, they can't understand it. They don't know it because it's not part of their paradigm, if that makes sense. So I think that's where that perfect love, perfect trust, faith has that disconnect, because too many people in our world are not shown how valuable they are to others. They've only been shown.
The word perfect, I think it's a tricky one for most of us.
Tricky.
Because perfect means without flaw. And everything is flawed, including our relationship with deity, because we are human beings. And as human beings,
flawed.
We are not perfect. Well, I mean, I am. You guys are, obviously.
Oh, okay.
But most people, not so perfect. Yeah, I'm a perfect pain in the ass. But
that's okay.
Yeah, hey, everybody's got a hobby.
Goals.
Yeah, but I think the trick with all of this is to find the terminology that you as a practitioner are the most comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with the word faith, then use perfect love, perfect trust. If you're not comfortable with those words, use it. If you need to just call it Tuesday, whatever makes you comfortable. Again, this is not a right way, wrong way, required, there will not be a test. All right, there's going to be a lot of tests, but, the universe.
Maybe not on that subject.
Not from us, don't worry. Yeah. We won't send you a multiple choice test.
Yeah, no, we grade on a sliding scale. You're okay, I promise.
Good.
But I think it is important to get away from terminology if the terminology it gets in the way of your practice.
Exactly. Well, and perfect is, we see this so much in the politics world where people just don't know the definition of a word, but they're going to use it in a bad way. Socialism, but they're thinking of fascism, and the fascism, but they're thinking of communism. We see that all the time in the politics arena. Perfect is the same way. I'm going to sound so Greek here, but it's come from the Greek word Delia. Perfect.
Let me go get the Windex.
Yeah, for real. Like this is a Greek moment, but we have corrupted that word. Patriarchy has corrupted that word to mean flawless. What it means it comes from the same word in Greek, telia. It means totelos. It means the end. It means not the end of like, because the Greeks didn't believe in linear time. It doesn't mean the end in the sense of like point A to B, you finish the journey. It means the completion of. So
totality.
maybe that's a better, yeah, that's probably
Well,
a
I'm just
better.
wondering if that's one of the origins of that, of the word totality, because it does sound a lot alike, and the meaning is a lot. I love languages. So I don't
Yeah.
speak many, but I love the connections, where the words came from. So tell us again what the words are.
Telia. So like if you spelled it in English, it'd be Teleia. Telia. And that means perfect. Telos is where that word originates from, which means the end. But it doesn't mean end like point A to B. It means end like when you've completed, like think of the major arcana in the tarot. They are complete. They're a complete cycle. But once it gets to the end, in a way, it really does loop back, or maybe you spiral into, the
Sort of like
wheel rather than the fool.
reincarnation.
Exactly.
You're ending one part of the path, but the path continues on, and you start all over at the beginning of a new path, but it's still part of the old path. It's
Exactly.
it's
And
the
that path
that
is
eats its
Telia.
tail.
Yeah. So like we would call that path, and even the Ouroboros, it's like this, it's something that we will never attain. It's this like this completion where that snake actually eats its tail. It's like that's what we're doing every time we reincarnate, but we're probably never really going to grab that tail. I mean, not in this lifetime, maybe a couple thousand years from now, who knows? But it's not something we're like actively like, oh, by Saturday, I'm going to take care of that. And I think that's our patriarchal like society is like, okay, what's the deadline? What's the goal? And it's like, well, the goal is less important than the desire the goal serves. The goal is like if I want to be a best-selling author, first goal is write a book or write a proposal. That best-selling author doesn't happen that first submission. That's the whole journey. That's the telia. That's the complete, perfect expression of the desire. So, because these semantics conversations, I love etymology. I love it because it tells us, it has, especially in Greek, it has everything hidden there of what the ancients did. And it just brings us, it's the telia. It brings us all the way back to the beginning to look at how it's reflected in the present.
Well, and I think that's one of the positive aspects of working with deity is if you are open to being guided on this path, sometimes they can nudge you in a direction you might not have thought to take on your own. Or they can, send you clues, hints, signs, whatever you want to call them, that say, yes, this was a good idea. No, this was not. This is not, turn around, take the left fork. The right fork is not for you. That one leads off a cliff. And that requires a certain openness of mind and spirit to be willing to accept that there may be answers that are outside what you're thinking, what your plan is. Oh, I've had so many plans. And, I think like 3 of them,
Actually, isn't that a Jewish expression? Man plans, God laughs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so much laughing. So
much
cackling. Goddess cackles.
Well, I write fiction and nonfiction. I never intended to become a nonfiction writer. That was not on my path was to write fiction. That was always what my path was. And then I had this nudge by the gods to write that first nonfiction book. And I went, okay, it's a one-off. I'll do it. This is cool. And 19 books to 3 decks later, I'm going,
here we are.
and I am still writing fiction.
Yeah.
But I am, for better or for worse, I am probably much better known for the nonfiction. And I touch people's lives in a very different way with the nonfiction. I've had people who've said, oh, thank you for writing this, this novel. It distracted me at a time when I really needed distraction.
Nice.
But, with the nonfiction, I have people come who'd say, you've changed my life, or, your tarot deck is the first one I ever felt like I could connect with. That was not the plan, not the plan at all, and, the only credit that I get is that when the nudge came to go left instead of right, I went with it. But other than, and I worked hard, really, really hard. But
and I don't think working with a deity means that you don't work hard.
No,
they're not, like we said, they're not going to take care of it all for you.
No, and in fact,
I actually think it's the opposite.
Yeah,
I think your life gets harder.
Harder.
No, they're like, oh, you did pretty well with that challenge. How about
here you go?
Yes, it's like, did you want to go to the next step of enlightenment? Guess what?
It's like a video game. Like, honestly, you get through a boss level and you're like, oh good. And then it's just kidding. The real boss is in the next room.
Yeah, just worst video game ever.
So if someone came to you today and said, look, I listened to the podcast and I get that working with deity is not hard. I mean, not easy. It's a difficult trek. And I want to have faith. I want to have perfect love, perfect trust. And they're not sure how to go about connecting with a deity. They think maybe one's reaching out to them, but they're not sure. What advice would you give them to, first of all, recognize the connection and then foster that connection?
Well, read my book when it comes out in April, because it's all in there. Llewellyn makes me say that. No, it's actually to address those kind of issues. What I say about this, as I say with everything else, is start small, try it, do a little thing, reach out, see if anybody reaches back. I mean, I reached out for years and years and years, and it turned out I was reaching out in the wrong place. Unitarians, lovely. They're whoever it is they follow, not my person. Buddhists, also fabulous. Don't really have a deity. So sometimes you just have to keep trying until you hit the right thing. But also that whole idea of it doesn't have to be a big, huge, you don't have to build an altar on the first day to a deity. You can read books and see if something resonates with you. You can, if you're not sure of a particular deity, you can always say God and Goddess. There is no reason why that. I use that quite a lot just to include anybody who feels like being included. I start my morning every morning by, greeting the gods, and I don't go through everybody by name. That would take a really long time. I say,
the afternoon.
I greet you, God and Goddess, at the start of a new day and ask that you send me the best day possible. And then I go on with my stuff. And at the end of the day, I do a gratitude thing with God and Goddess. And because I work with a number of different deities, that's pretty inclusive. But it also helps if you don't know who to talk to. Really, you can do research in a couple of different ways. One is books, not just mine. Lots of people wrote good books. One is, if you are lucky enough to work with other people who have connections to deity, you can talk to them about how it works for them and maybe whether their deities that they work with would help you. You can also, figure out what aspects of you would like to see reflected back at you. Do you want, which things are important to you? Do you want a deity who has things that are very much in common with you? Or what are you lacking? What do you need filled up in you that you can't find in yourself? And maybe look for a deity that has those aspects. If you wish you were a warrior and you're not a warrior, you can pick a warrior god or goddess and ask them to help you become stronger and fiercer and more willing to fight for the underdog.
And on the other side of that, if you think a deity particularly is reaching out, like if you're like, I feel like this is the Morrigan, and every time you say that, it feels more true. And you're like, yeah, but I'm not a warrior. I could never be a warrior. That's exactly why it is the Morgan, because you do need a bit of that to fill your cup. So just to say, it kind of goes in reverse with that too.
And this is going to seem really silly. Watch out for goosebumps. That one of the things that happens to me when something really is right on, when I'm doing a tarot reading for somebody and it's a really important message, I get goosebumps. And I say to them, okay, this you need to pay attention to. If you are talking to deity and you call on a particular name and you get goosebumps, pay attention.
And it might be a different physical confirmation.
Right.
Like it could be, this is the same for raising energy. There's going to be ways your body lets you know the energy is here. So when we raise energy within or from the earth, or if we are calling in cosmic energy or we're calling in deities, you might have similar sensations. For me, that is true. I get this same feeling in my palms, whatever energy is I'm moving through. I get this like warmth, and it feels like a ball that I can't even begin to close my hands around. It's like a basketball.
And sometimes your head will tingle. I mean, it's
yes.
different for everybody.
Or you sweat. Like it's so weird, but you can be perfectly comfortable, and all of a sudden it's like you have a little fever for a minute. It's like very hot.
And pay attention to signs. Like if you suddenly start seeing crows everywhere, there are a few different deities that are associated with crows. You may want to look into those. I mean, and I don't just mean like, oh, they're in my garden eating my corn. I mean, they fly over your car. They show up in pictures and paintings. And when you run into them everywhere, that's usually a sign you're supposed to be paying attention to something. Or sometimes they'll come to you in a dream.
I was going to say, if trust is the hardest part, dreams will be where they choose.
And those dreams feel different. They don't feel like a regular dream. You can usually, if you're paying attention, I had a friend who had Yamaya come to her in a dream, and it's not her culture. She was very hesitant, but she got picked. Yamaya said, I am here for you. You don't argue with that. She had this dream that was very clearly the goddess coming to her and saying, I have chosen you. You are mine now. Nice. And, if you have a dream like that, pay attention.
Pay attention. Yeah.
I mean, that's really pay attention, listen to your own gut, however that manifests for you, and also look at the outside world. And worst comes to worst, if you don't get anything dramatic, I didn't get anything dramatic. Try working with a deity, and if it feels right, keep working with them. And if you don't feel like you're making that connection, or if it doesn't seem like anything is happening, maybe say thank you very much. Always be polite. Always be polite with deities. Very important. Say thank you very much, and then try something else. And keep trying. This is part of this perfect love and perfect trust. They're out there. You don't necessarily know which one is for you. Just keep hold of that idea that you will eventually find them. And not everybody ends up with a particular named deity. I know people who have practiced their entire lives, or their entire witchy lives, simply saying God and Goddess, or the universe, or powers that be. You may have an image in your mind of what that looks like, but even that isn't absolutely necessary. As long as you can feel some kind of connection. That first night when God and Goddess reached back to me, I mean, I definitely saw sort of, male and female glowing forms in my head. Yeah. I didn't get names attached to them. I just got yep, this is where you're supposed to be. You've been looking for us, here we are.
Yeah. I recently had a student we were going through the Garden of the Gods, and part of that is connecting with your deity team, whoever is on that, maybe one, maybe several, whoever's on your team. And she realized in that session that Athena had been with her entire life, but she didn't look like Athena. She didn't appear like Athena, like we're told Athena should appear. And then she realized, oh my God, you've been there my entire life. Now I know who you are really. And I think that can be one of those things where the deity is probably there already. They've been reaching out, but just not in the conventional way that you're expecting it. And I think that's a
Yeah,
really
and
important
so
thing.
sometimes you don't recognize it because you're kind of looking in the wrong place, or
Hmm.
you're expecting it to manifest in a way that it wasn't until I was in a Wiccan circle where there were a whole bunch of people who knew what they were looking for, and maybe that helped. Or maybe it was just that I was finally at the point in my life where I was ready.
Ready.
And I think that happens a lot of times. It was sort of funny because I went to a friend of mine, this hypnotherapist friend, who's a witch, afterwards, and I went, oh my God, I'm a witch. And she went, yeah, I know. And I went, what do you mean you know? And she said, oh, I've known for years. And I said, well, why didn't you
Why did you
tell
say
me?
something?
And she said, because you weren't ready yet. You had
Right.
to find your way there yourself.
Yes.
And I wasn't ready yet. And if you're not ready, it's okay. It's a it's a path, and sometimes it's a slow kind of uphill. Sometimes we leap,
Yeah.
it's just what it is. And you know, I've been doing this for a really, really, really long time. I still don't have a particular deity that I call on that I would consider to be my patron or matron deity. I work with Hecate a lot. I work with, a few others that, seem to align with my goals and things. I often don't even try to put a name or an image. I just know they're out there. And if that's what works for you, that's fine.
Beautifully said. Deborah, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm very glad you wrote this book, and I'm very excited for people to get it. So please, everybody go pre-order Everyday Witch's Book of Deities, but tell everybody else where they can find you and support what you're doing.
Oh, well, if you want to come to my house and do my laundry, oh, not that kind of stuff. Okay. And I'm not telling you where my house is. So I have a website, deborahblakeauthor.com, the very imaginatively named deborahblakeauthor.com. And you can find links there to everywhere. I'm all over the interwebs. I'm on Instagram, and the friend is forcing me to be on TikTok, and I'm on Facebook. I'm still on Twitter, God knows why. And I have an Etsy shop with signed books and some cool magic kits and things. I have a Patreon that has a bunch of different levels and a lot of cat pictures. I you know,
Nothing wrong
and
with that.
yeah, no, absolutely not. And if you go to my website, it'll also have all the books and where you can find them and descriptions of them. So if there's something in particular that you're interested in, I give monthly online classes. So you can find whatever like December's class is and a link to register if you want to. I also do Zoom tarot readings, and you can find a link to ask me about that too. So yeah, that's, if you're looking online, if you're on, say, Instagram, I'm Deborah Blake author there. If you can't find me under plain old Deborah Blake, look under Deborah Blake author. But yeah, the website's the simplest place. And many of my books are available directly from Llewellyn. I will give one word of warning before we go, which is if you are interested in the Everyday Witch Tarot, which I love that tarot. Many people love that tarot. There are so many pirated knockoffs of that tarot. If you really want it, my best suggestion is to get it directly from Llewellyn so you can be sure you are not getting a Chinese piece of crap with a QR code on the back that will not take you anywhere. Makes me a little cranky. Or you could, get a signed one from my Etsy if you want to. They're the same thing. Don't feel like you have
Buy direct. I think that's the best advice when you're
and
looking up
and
authors. Buy direct.
of course, I always recommend if you have a local indie bookstore or a local, indie witchcraft store, get things there. But even they occasionally pick up knockoff copies and don't realize it. They're not doing it on purpose, but be very, very careful with that. But yeah, you can find my things pretty much everywhere. I'm everywhere. There's no escape.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having
always
me.
good to talk to you.
Always a joy.
Merry meet,
Merry part,
and merry meet again. Thank you for joining us on the Magick Kitchen Podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Wells. You can learn more about my current offerings and my upcoming retreats to Greece at ElyseWells.com. That's ELYSEWELLES.com.
Did you know you can get a free reading from me every single Wednesday at 10 a.m.? Join me in my live devotional space for Sacred Wild Wednesdays. We gather live on a webinar for free readings with oracle texts and tarot decks, magical musings on the moment, and some grounded spiritual guidance rooted in land. If you're craving a pause, a recalibration, and some community, you are so warmly invited to join us. Visit ElyseWells.com/sacredwildwednesdays to register and get the link straight to your inbox every Wednesday.